No! Well, thank God it was all just a dream, eh? Welcome to Rinon's Final Fantasy XIV Hour, the potentially poorly titled show where we discuss what's already come, as well as what is yet to be. Patch 7.2 is on the horizon. In fact, the live letter just took place this week, a hallowed tradition in which Yoshida and the Square Enix development team attempt to showcase how exciting the upcoming content is in the most painfully boring way possible. PowerPoint presentations and bullet points, again. That makes it the perfect time to discuss whether we're expecting to be taken on a bewitching flight or if it sets off alarm pheromones. There's also one or two topics about the releases we've already got on this expansion that I want to include here. If you want to hop around, there's chapters for easy navigation. Let's be off then, yeah? One of the biggest criticisms that pops up time and time again about Dawntrail and the game on the whole right now is that Square Enix has developed a chronic addiction to putting the square.
That's right, it goes in the square hole.
Yes.
Let me explain. Let's think of the overall content within an expansion as a box of treats, with little compartments for each major patch, 1 through 5. This really is sounding just like the meme, isn't it? But bear with me. Each expansion since Shadowbringers, with large swathes of those blocks being instated from as early as 2013 following this trend, the same blocks go into the same holes without fail. That is to say, in a 0.1 patch release, for example, we have a high level of confidence on exactly which editions we will be receiving, because they'll be the exact same as what we got last expansion, and the one before that. If we look forward to 7.3 as a use case, we can expect to get about 2 hours of story quests, a few Hildebrand quests, 1 or 2 side story quests, a new Alliance raid and ultimate, a dungeon, a trial, an Unreal, updated treasure maps, Beast Tribes custom delivery vendor, a deep dungeon, because one has been confirmed for this expansion and 0.35 is the patch they released it in, and maybe a PvP map. In a shocking twist, there's a chance we might also receive one of either an additional relic zone, criterion, or chaotic raid on top of that. Inherently, having regularity and consistency is a good thing. Reliably knowing what patch an ultimate will be on, for example, is very helpful, so that raiders can take time off accordingly or manage their evenings to make space. This is healthy, this is good, although I really don't like the fact that Square Enix announced the actual patch release so late, even if you can kind of infer when it will be. Being able to plan leveling alternative jobs around the fact you know a beast tribe is releasing that will allow them to catch up easier is positive and healthy. Players deserve to have an expectation of a certain level of volume and of quality, especially if they're paying a monthly sub. Where a problem lies is that I believe Square Enix has been putting the wrong blocks into the wrong holes for so long that it has been cemented in tradition, and that this is a core point of friction with those that are on the fence as to whether they want to keep their sub or blow up their 3-bedroom goblet villa in a walkable neighbourhood. Dawntrail made some notable improvements to battle pacing, allowing us the distinct luxury of 2 mechanics per 30-second cycle instead of 1, and they also made them a lot more readable. Significantly reduced are the days of feeling like you need an advanced calculus textbook to understand the wall of debuffs in your face. Instead, we have a more tactile sense of challenge, that which is present through most of Light Heavyweight Savage. Simpler, yet more agile. But despite Square Enix showing forethought in regards to developing their dungeon and raid content to be engaging to a wider spectrum of players, they have showed no signs of life in regards to this scheduling dilemma. We often hear that there's nothing to do for non-raiders in regards to the 0.1 patch, and this is certainly part of it. So, let's fix it then, shall we? It can be a little thought experiment. First, let's get a list of all of the major optional content released each expansion. I'm going to leave off stuff like main story quests and dungeons, things we receive every patch without fail. I'll also get rid of stuff like Hildebrand and custom delivery vendors, because I think they're kind of whatever, it's fine. So, we will be covering 3 Savage tiers, 2 Ultimates, 1 Deep Dungeon, 3 Alliance raids, 1 Blue Mage update, 1 Beastmaster update, now at least, 1 Relic quest for which we will be following the Shadowbringers format of having 2 zones but 4 total content releases, Cosmic Exploration, which will replace Island Sanctuary and follow the Ishgard Restoration format, 1 major PvP update, although in fairness, sometimes they just release a new map randomly, sometimes in a patch, I'm not going to factor that in, 1 ocean fishing update, 3 Criterion or Chaotic additions. So firstly, assuming we get all of this, then we're actually getting more content than in previous expansions. In the past, a concession has been made somewhere. In Endwalker, the Relic fell victim. In Shadowbringers, it was the Deep Dungeon. Receiving 3 of either a Chaotic or a Criterion is a little hopeful from me, but it's based off that expectation set in Endwalker where we got 3 Criterions, and hopefully it will be solidified by the newer additions to the development team. If you want, you can take a screenshot of the list and mark how you would spread this out across an expansion, because that is exactly what we're going to do next. My little disclaimer is that, like I said, this is a thought experiment. In the real world, it is not this simple. Different updates require different amounts of work. For example, an entire new Savage tier is not equitable to an ocean fishing update with 1 new route, and it isn't realistic to just throw everything into 0.0 or 0.1 with workloads in mind. With that understood, and the fact that we're not really factoring that in, let's mess around and have some fun with it, shall we? Firstly, I think that Savage is currently perfect as it is, releasing in 0.0, 0.2 and 0.4. The linchpin of FF14 content cycles are the item level patch and the catch-up patch, and I don't want to mess with that too much. Alliances also fit perfectly on the odd patches, slotting them in at 0.1, 0.3 and 0.5. These are intentionally staggered, and they work just as they are. The Relic needs to release earlier. The Bozja model of Relic questline and field operations came with 2 zones. We got the Bozjan Southern Front and Zadnor, and 2 additional content releases within those zones, providing Castrum Lacus Latore and Delubrum Regine. We also got Dalriada, which just came with Zadnor, so 4 content releases, 2 major and 2 minor, and small quests along the way that don't add new instances alongside. We'll bake Castrum into the first release because I feel like that was just them not being able to get it out in time, and consider it 3 major content releases overall. So my proposition is that the Relic quests release with a small introductory quest and maybe a grind step that ties into your initial expansion experience alongside 0.0. Something that has you out in the world, doing some fates, hunts, or trials. It doesn't need to be complex, it doesn't need to be difficult. It just needs to act as a small introduction. In 0.1 comes the first major field operation, with a smaller supplementary quest coming in 0.2 that maybe comes alongside again a grind step. In 0.3 comes the Delubrum Regine replacement. In 0.4, once more a supplementary step, and in 0.5 comes that second zone, finally. In every odd patch we receive a major update, be it a zone or duty that ties into the Relic, and on the evens we get an additional step that uses existing content and existing zones without the need for new bespoke content to fuel it. The Cosmic Exploration can import 1-for-1 the model that Ishgard Restoration uses, with the major updates releasing across 3 patches, 0.2, 0.3 and 0.4, in which the equivalent to Skybuilder's rankings and district restorations took place, with the initial base release in 0.1. In 0.5, Ishgard Restoration received Fates, so I'll chuck a mini update in the 0.5 there too, I think that's fair enough. Deep Dungeon stays at 0.3, and Beastmaster and Blue Mage take up residence in 0.2 and 0.4 respectively. I feel like the way things currently stand, we can expect to get those in 0.4 and 0.5, so I would like to push them a little bit earlier. Ocean fishing goes into 0.5 to offset the lack of major hand and land content in that patch compared to in others, and I honestly feel that the major PvP update should be expected to take place with the expansion launch itself. Between Ultimates and whichever of Chaotic and Criterion wins the internal punch-up, we have 5 content updates. Convenient, considering we have 5 patches. My potentially controversial take is that I personally would prefer Ultimates to bookend an expansion, with one coming out in 0.1 and the other releasing in 0.5. It does mean a long time between releases, yes, but we get a good amount of engaging supplementary content nowadays, and the 0.5 patch cycle is always the longest. This gives the most challenging piece of content to clear space to breathe for a little longer, so that groups can provide it their full focus. For those that take time off too, it's a little less painful to appease the work time gods when it's spaced out this way. So there it is. 0.0 is definitely a little dry on the ground compared to other patches, but when we consider that we receive all of the leveling dungeons, new zones, fates, hunts, 10 levels to each job, and more trials than usual to tackle, it makes sense. As far as I'm concerned, expansion releases themselves do a perfectly good job, with an introductory relic step helping to give dedicated players a little more to sink their teeth into whilst they wait for 0.1. We also have to bear in mind here that we can stagger these releases across a major patch, so for example with that relic content release, we could release it in 0.05 so that it comes out alongside Savage. It's important that content releases a little earlier into the expansion cycle. Nobody wants to wait till 7.25 to even see a whiff of a relic quest, and it's ludicrous that this is the norm. Each patch here has something that appeals to those that don't raid, and dedicated raiders, as well as pieces of content that act to filter both of those groups together. Crafters and gatherers get something to sink their teeth into, and to me at least, shifting some of these releases in what amounts to a overall fairly minuscule way can have much wider ramifications for how many reasons we have to log in and actually play the game. Really, though, this is actually all just a ploy to ask for a lot, all at once, so that when it's swiftly rejected, I can change my stance and go, please, 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 Square Enix, can we get the relic quest earlier? Please, please, please. That's all. And it sounds a lot more reasonable. This video is sponsored by Crystal of Atlan. Crystal of Atlan is a magic punk MMO that you can enjoy on both your PC and mobile device. Join the Thornbird Adventurers Guild and embark on a journey to uncover the secrets of the legendary Crystal of Atlan. The linchpin of the combat system in this action RPG is the level of all-encompassing control you have over both your movement and skill casts, making each battle feel fast, fluid, and altogether different from one another. No two fights play out the same way. Master the skies in aerial combat that iterates and refines traditional MMO battles into something much more exciting. With multiple classes to choose from, each possessing over 20 skill combinations, you have vast room to showcase your creativity in making new builds and attack plans. But it's not just about solo play, you can also team up with your friends to take on challenging co-op dungeons, or join a guild fleet for large-scale multiplayer battles. Crystal of Atlan's PvP allows you to test your mettle against the best of the best, making use of every ability and movement tool at your disposal in lightning-fast battles. If you pre-register now by clicking the link in the description, you can obtain early access to the game and a slew of exclusive in-game rewards through the pre-registration event, including the Legend Returns outfit and Wonderland Explorer avatar frame. Invite your friends too, and thanks to the Magitech Summon event, be in with a chance of winning an iPhone 16 Pro Max, PlayStation 5 Pro, and more. Dive into a magical world where technology and mysticism collide. Click the link in the description, sign up, and join the adventure today. Thank you so much again for sponsoring this video. Have you seen this little A Realm Reborn secret? This gravestone shows us a glimpse of a great hero lost to time. So, I asked social media, terrible idea by the way, I know, whether they liked Light Heavyweight or not, now that it's mostly over and is readying to be thrown off the starboard end of the ship into the abyss to make way for the next one. Here's what they had to say. Normal mode had me very excited, but Savage left me feeling like it was missing something. Honestly, one of the best raid tiers since Shadowbringers, not just in terms of fight design, but with story, characters, visual design, music, flavor. The whole package has been an absolute thrill to play through normal and Savage. Banger! While you can say that it was a bit too easy, the fights are just fun. I think it was a great introductory tier, and I liked that they tried new stuff like the simp meter in M2S. Even if it didn't work out perfectly, seeing them attempt new stuff is good. Also, I like seeing some of the arena creativity. Banger! Maybe too easy for experienced raiders, but it's a very welcoming place for new raiders, and had some much needed fun and whimsy for everyone. I do hope the next tier is fairly harder, since these fights are a bit too forgiving though. Even some of the messiest runs still clear in PF. As a baby player who didn't think the DPS checks were jokes, banger. Minus the B. The B is troublesome. Better than any Panda tier except maybe Anabasios. Honey Bee is left in the garbage can. The difficulty of this tier was lacking compared to some of our previous iterations, but it was fun to prog. To me, it felt like they designed the fights prioritizing fun over difficulty, which is okay for a first tier. The boss designs were also really awesome. Bust. This was my least favourite tier ever released in FF14, and it's due to the encounters not feeling interesting at all. Banger tier. It was also approachable for people new to raiding to step in and try Savages. I've helped almost 30 people kill M4S now. As much as I hate the song, M2S was the most fun to prog, and M4S is the most fun I've had since P4S. I'm expecting Abyssos 2.0 next tier though. Banger, in my opinion. Love the prog and how accessible it was as a first raid tier. Really looking forward to the next. Same opinion as most people. Fun to play, but too easy. It was refreshing to have a single boss final floor this time, instead of 2 half-finished bosses. It was okay, but God was the tier locked for way too long. Fun to prog, too easy DPS check though. It's missing that feeling of accomplishment. Alarm Pheromone the only real bad part of the tier, rest is pretty good tier overall. Still sad the best tank buster we had in Dawntrail so far is Valley Garmander. M4S was kinda boring in the second half. The fire and water sword mechanic had way too long of a wind up with no real complexity to it. Also, it's sad that one of the most interesting parts of M1S was skipped by any group with decent DPS. Really like the style of punishment from M2 with simp stacks. M3 was very boring. M4 could have used some faster pacing for what its mechanics are asking from you. M1 was perfect. Nerf Pictomancer. I think it was neither. The tier was in the middle of banger and bust in many ways. The design of the fights and the prog was fun and the songs were really good. However, the DPS checks and mechanics were way too easy for there to be a sense of accomplishment for many raiders. It was okay, but it seemed like most of the mechanics were slight variations of stack or spread with no puzzle involved. I also think that M4S not being a wall boss removed a lot of complexity that should have been there for the second phase. They were all fun to prog. M1S and M2S are a bit boring to farm. M3 and M4 are fun to farm. M2S punishment design of you can prog to the end but won't meet DPS check was a good idea on paper, but created very awkward situations during PF prog. As a person that started raiding late in Endwalker, this was a really cool starting point. Clearing M1S as my first Savage was a really awesome moment for me. I don't know about veteran players, but this raid was a banger. I thought it was fun as fuck to prog, and boring to re-clear. M3S on melee is amazing, and I hope we get more fights that make me really fight for uptime like that one. The rest of the tier is alright, not amazing, but not awful. Great first tier in my opinion, really enjoyed all 4 fights. M2S was a ton of fun to prog especially. Anabasios was my first tier, and it felt like a huge trial by fire. It was refreshing to have prog be easier and less stressful for light heavyweight, but I'm looking forward to a ramp up in challenge. I'm giving Square Enix the big benefit of the doubt that the tier was made a lot more lenient this time to ensure that newer players gave it a go, and it was a good tier to be your first one for sure. For more experienced players, it was a bit meh though, and could have been tuned up a bit. Banger, but needed to be uncapped literal months ago. For me, it was a banger, and I had an overall better experience than I had in the past ones. I started raiding in Asphodelos. Mid. Difficulty in games is one of those subjects that is kind of tiring to discuss for me, if I'm completely honest. Everybody gets all tribalistic about it and hops into one of two carefully picketed camps, and quickly, you're either shit or a no-life, with no room for conversation or nuance in between. So with that said, let's have a discussion about difficulty, shall we? Since July, Final Fantasy XIV's handling and prioritization of difficulty in raid and endgame content has changed. Light Heavyweight Savage is one of the easiest tiers we've received in a long time. Similarly, Futures Rewritten, the most recent Ultimate, was much more forgiving than those that came in Endwalker and was able to be cleared much more quickly by front-running groups, as well as a number of challenge runs being completed. Like the Omega Protocol, it was beaten with no healers on patch, but more recently and in a greater, more impressive achievement overall, a group took it down with no tanks as well. Dawntrail's design philosophy so far has a heavy lean on fast, rapid-fire mechanics that expect quick wits, but in exchange are forgiving to individual mistakes, often avoiding instant wipe states and leading to a higher clear rate overall. They are easier to beat, all things considered. With that in mind, I want to pose the question: does difficulty matter? Is this direction healthy? The answer isn't really as simple as yes or no. So firstly, I believe it's important to have aspirational content in any live service game, especially an MMO. Having a goal to work towards and a linchpin that allows players to aim towards a specific level of performance and mastery of the game's mechanics matters. A level of prestige to the finish line of your growth journey acts as a motivator to many. If there isn't any content that requires you to understand FF14 systems, most would never learn nor interact with them at any deep level to begin with. Jobs have so many abilities because the developer wants you to interact with them, weave them together, and develop a level of proficiency. Situational skills are there to be taken advantage of, and uptime constraints are designed to be a test. If a game wants to reward teamwork or any form of mastery, but never requires the player to employ them, then they won't. Many people are goal-oriented. That's normal and healthy. Games are inherently structured to be a sequence of goals and rewards for meeting them. I hate to use the Dark Souls comparison because it's rote, but it's a fairly easy use case that everybody is familiar with. The reason people are obsessed with Souls-like games is because they love that incredible feeling of overcoming adversity that they get after defeating a new boss or making it to the next bonfire despite the odds. This game has a very impressive way of crystallizing the sequence of goal and reward loot in a really satisfying way. Exploring the world, finding a rare item, or piecing the story and lore together from item descriptions, these all feel good, yes, but the real rush comes from mastery. Your feeling of victory is forged on the anvil of your prior failures, strengthened through your struggles and pain points, under the implicit understanding between you and the game that when you beat it, you're going to be proud. Victory and that sense of pride is the emotional reward that comes with progress. Final Fantasy XIV is very similar to this in that regard. You can experience this on a smaller scale too. During the learning phase, there are smaller goals and rewards scattered constantly within. In FF14, those often amount to clearing a mechanic successfully, to managing to do your rotation correctly in a particular phase, to maintaining uptime during that moment the boss jumps all over the place, to making an adjustment when another player messes up. These are all signs of mastery and they feel good to pull off. Your satisfaction and ability to progress through them consistently is the reward. However, there is an entirely different side that is important to factor in. FF14 has, at times, stumbled and fallen victim to incorporating what I would argue is both uninteresting and unfulfilling difficulty. There is such a thing as bad challenge. It is good to feel like you need to work to accomplish something, but the moment where it strays away from being a good thing is when you feel like you do not have control of your ability to succeed, where you feel like you're rolling the dice instead of testing your mettle. Phase 5 of the Omega Protocol is unfortunately a good example. Instead of feeling that you have any level of agency over the application of Dynamis stacks individually, because the developers didn't factor in player communication or honestly didn't think through the mechanic well enough, the two standard resolutions are to allow either one player to micromanage the party via marking, or to use third-party tools to have them do it for them. Having each player do it manually themselves isn't just a little bit tougher, it turns the entire phase into a nightmarish mess of priorities and memorization. It's badly thought out. Extensive debuff vomit is another example of challenge that in my opinion doesn't feel good to overcome when it's recurring. The initial solution is fun, but execution is often unenjoyable to do. A third example is one that hasn't been as big of a problem thanks to updates to FF14 systems, but there have been many examples of mechanics that just do not function correctly under the constraints of the game's systems and latency, and sometimes will just randomly go wrong for little to no reason. Grand Octet in UCOB is a good example, where the hatch orbs very rarely like to do a little loop-de-loop. Relying too heavily on these methods to increase the difficulty makes for a frustrating experience that doesn't feel as satisfying to overcome because people often feel that their growth alone is not what allowed them to surpass it. And if it doesn't feel rewarding, then what's the point? Games like this are supposed to present a challenge, yeah, but they're meant to be fun as well. Dawntrail is a very clear attempt from Square Enix to course correct this. I imagine that the development team internally has discussed this very matter at length. Considering that Yoshida has spoken about difficulty in numerous interviews, it's fair to say that this is a point of regret for them, too. So far, their course correction seems to come in the form of shunting the difficulty in a different direction entirely. As I mentioned earlier, 7.0 encounters across the board are faster on average than those that came before, and for that speed, they trade in randomization and sometimes complexity. If we draw some direct comparisons between Futures Rewritten here and the Endwalker Ultimate's Dragon Song's Reprise and the Omega Protocol, there is a clear shift in reducing the body check wipe states, perfection requirements, and randomization of mechanics. These are where concessions have been made in an attempt to reduce bad difficulty. But unfortunately, you can't close Pandora's box. Whenever a new fight is released that dwarfs what came before, players will inevitably rise to the challenge and get better. This happened with UCOB, this happened with DSR, with the Omega Protocol, and with Alexander in Heavensward as well. Those cutting-edge players have high skill levels, and they've improved through encounters like the Omega Protocol. If you ever stop increasing the difficulty, or as is the case here, offload it to a more naturalistic type of challenge, they will find it easier in comparison. Is there a happy middle ground here? Probably not, honestly. Somebody will be upset. Either the cutting-edge progression raider feeling like their raid tiers and ultimates are getting too easy, or the median raider feeling pushed out, which happened a few times last expansion. I also feel this issue would resolve itself much more easily if some of that challenge were re-implemented in the form of optional job mechanics, actions in the rotation that allow for optimization, and shifting that challenge burden slightly away from the heavy encounter focus we have at the moment. I still believe there's enough of a challenge present, mostly. I have my gripes about the way the team implement healing, but I've discussed that before. And I think if the encounters are unique and interesting, they're able to stand on their own 2 feet, and are truly fantastic. Some fights in Dawntrail come close to or do outright manage that as far as I'm concerned. Others most certainly did not. At the end of the day, to me, it's more important to be interesting than to be hard. As long as there are lots of avenues within that fight for players to optimize and feel the reward of mastery. Getting a clear does not need to be the sole overwhelming challenge. I'm interested to see what they do next here, and I hope that more than anything they go crazy with it and make an entirely new experience. That's what will make me happy, at least. So I've been playing the MSQ a decade late, right? And I just finished A Realm Reborn. I have a question for all of you caught up Carloses that have experienced everything. Are we always such arseholes, or is that just in A Realm Reborn? So one moment that stood out to me was when I was doing Copperbell Mines for the first time. This early game, unassuming dungeon in which we are tasked with clearing a mine of rampaging giants. Standard MMO affair, kill the guys, tick the box. But through talking to the surrounding NPCs and the cutscenes within, and the ambient atmosphere of the dungeon itself, it becomes clear that something's off. These giants are victims. They're slaves of a past regime, forgotten and left for dead, and painstakingly, over years of chipping away at the cold, hard stone, they're close to freedom at last. I'd be pissed off too. I totally get it. And yet we come in here and kill them all because they're slowing down mine operations. Proper cutthroat, really. Chaotic is Dawntrail's big risk. Their new large-scale content that was anticipated to be 7.x's answer to the Criterion experiment last expansion. And boy, has it generated some mixed opinions. I've seen people call it the best new addition to the content portfolio ever. And I've also seen people say, and for the record, this is a direct quote from a tweet that I saw, "Want my feedback? Tone it down a bit. No one person screws up the raid wipes. Let people unsync it. This isn't ultimate. This isn't midcore. It's glorified savage bullcrap. I can say that chaotic is cancer. You wait hours for the party to fail and disband, while the savage raiders get their stuff and quit doing it or don't bother to help other people. All I'm left with is anger, disappointment, and depression." I'm not even going to try and unpackage that outburst, but it's fair to say we have a mixed bag. I've not spoken about Chaotic on the channel yet, so let's have a little chat about it. Chaotic fills a very important niche as far as I'm concerned, one which hasn't seen a new introduction in many, many years. This is gateway raiding content. Introductory, welcoming content that can be placed alongside extreme trials and first turns of Savage as being viable options for a player's first raiding experience. It's a really good one too. Being 24-man makes it extremely easy to go with a party of friends without too much preparation or planning requirement and just get stuck in right away. I really like that about it. Phases are relatively straightforward, it doesn't demand too much of any one individual player, and it isn't very punishing at all. Despite this, it's fun to do. Having content like this in FF14 that provide players avenues to experience what's fun about raiding is fantastic, and I'm glad that we have another one. Square Enix also did a bloody good job in regards to the suite of rewards available. Criterion last expansion was a mess, but this time they've knocked it out of the park. Best in slot item level gear that gives us additional options in the upgrading process. Finally, something we desperately needed. Multiple mounts, a hairstyle, and for those that prefer to make gil, market boardable options. This is how we should be rewarded for content, because it incentivizes repeat clears. With 4 months in between major content releases, one and done isn't really a sustainable model. I even like the Demi-Materia system conceptually a lot, as well as the fact that one of the Demi-Materia currencies can be obtained in larger quantities should you help new players clear. Right now, though, the number of additional drops for helping new players is random, and you can just end up with nothing. This should not be the case. It's perfectly reasonable to just be guaranteed some form of additional drop per player for helping someone attain their first clear. We don't need to randomize this. Whilst structurally and the space it takes within the game has me positively glowing, I have much more mixed opinions about the Cloud of Darkness Chaotic itself as an encounter. The first phase is great. Living up to the name, it is chaotic. Pull-ins and knockbacks and lasers and gazes and stacks and dodging bricks. Everything here was what I initially anticipated from the raid, and it was really fun. If you died, you often didn't cause a raid wipe as a result, and it was fast enough and frenetic enough to keep you on your toes, with misplaced stones from other players proving a hilarious unexpected floor hazard at times. Where my issues begin was with the introduction of the tile phase. It was clear these mechanics were coming, based on both previews before release, as well as the fact that it was a key part of what made E9S a challenge in the first place, but I was actually a little disappointed to learn how they functioned in Chaotic. So, the tile phase of Chaotic splits your raid into 3. 6 will go on the west platform, 6 on the east, and the other 12 will disperse amongst the tiles in the centre in groups of 3. The west and east platform groups must deal with attacks from the new Cloud of Darkness adds that spawn, clones of the E9S boss, as well as attacks from the centre Cloud of Darkness. They're ducking and weaving and taking a fairly active role throughout the phase. The tile players do not. They do have mechanics to deal with, and those mechanics are integral, and can often snowball into a wipe state if disregarded or repeatedly failed. But those mechanics are so few and far between, and so simple, that you feel like you aren't an active participant in the encounter the majority of the phase. Aside from your moments of glory, shining moments that exemplify what the tiles could have and should have been, you feel like you're just there to hit the boss. I would have loved to see a short section that just recreated the entire arena out of tiles and shortened the refresh timers exponentially, just so we could watch players dipping up and down and running into each other, living up once more to that chaotic moniker. I would have liked a mechanic too that fed outer players into the middle at one point to avoid a mechanic, and then had them trudge back out one by one. Whenever I'm stuck in the middle, I feel a bit like that picture of Squidward watching the guys outside having fun. It also felt that this phase was the one in which your personal responsibility became a negative. Because of the towers forcing vulnerability stacks and the sheer size of the arena, there were many cases in Party Finder where mechanics would be failed by a group on the opposite end of the arena, on the other side of the boss and invisible, and those waves of damage would wash over and just cause a full raid wipe. There was no tactile sense of, oh, this is what's gone wrong, and this is why it's happened. Just that we wiped because someone somewhere messed up at an invisible side of the arena. The worst kind of wipe is one that not only you have no agency over, but also you can't even see because it happens on some far off land and you just get to reap the punishment for it a little while later. Then, 2/3 of the way through the fight, the Cloud of Darkness merges back with the 2 adds and leaps onto the edge of the arena, and you're expecting something new. This is exciting. But it just repeats the start of the encounter again, and then goes into its enrage cast. Why? Didn't we eradicate this type of encounter design in Stormblood? Why does the boss just repeat halfway through? I was disappointed in that regard for sure. I guess for me, what this chaotic represents and how it fills out the content catalogue was a lot more positive than how I felt about the fight itself. The fight was fine, but I do not consider it a standout by any means. I would, however, love to see another chaotic later on in the expansion, to see how they iterate on the process now that they've been afforded that testbed. It could be something truly special. The format has so much potential after all. I just hope that we don't lose Criterion for good in order for Chaotic to flourish. Patch 7.2 is pivotal for Dawntrail's success. If they are to stick the landing, smashing this patch out of the park is how they'll do it. They're releasing the coveted second raid tier, the inaugural relic questline for the expansion, alongside the hotly anticipated first field exploration since Shadowbringers, and Cosmic Exploration, all in one patch. These are most of the heavy hitters for this expansion, and they need to shine. I'm recording this part of the video the night before the live letter, so I'm in the same boat as you, literally. I have no idea whether I'm going to come out of tomorrow excited or concerned. So that was something, huh? Okay, so there's a lot of good, like a lot of good, and some bad. Let's start with the good. The patch trailer was great. Very visually appealing, and you can tell right away that this one is much more laden with content than that which came before. We also got confirmation that Savage will release 1 week after normal. This happened last expansion and I'm glad it's back, and it should be here to stay. This adjustment benefits 99% of the player base, and I hope we won't have to doubt for its future inclusion ever again. Once more, the Arcadian floors are incredibly varied thematically too. We have Mr. Mecha, the Vandal Lalafell, the most fantastic dancer in the Far West, and of course, Glorp. Hopefully the announcer is as good as ever, that's all I need really. Melee DPS are receiving an overall buff, with the hint that uptime constraints may be more of a concern for them in the next tier. And finally, Pictomancer will be receiving a much needed reduction in DPS. I hope they tuned this correctly. They did a whole section on PvP and it was good, but it's not really something that I'm particularly excited about, and this also isn't a live letter recap. So let's skip on, shall we? Releases will be staggered. Cosmic Exploration comes in 7.21, the Field Operation comes in 7.25. This makes sense. I'm a fan of modes with some level of competition, like Cosmic Exploration and Savage getting their own bespoke release date so that players can afford them their full attention for a small period. I'm really excited for the Field Operation. It looks like it's going to be absolutely huge. Cosmic Exploration is Dawntrail's answer to Ishgard Restoration, and takes many elements from both that and Island Sanctuary in an attempt to refine both into something overall more engaging. You'll take on missions which are much like Guild Leaves, which will have you crafting and gathering particular materials, and turn them in using the fruits of those labour to upgrade your base, and over time it will grow and flourish, visually changing and increasing its facilities. They also have emergency missions which will require multiple players across the instance to fulfill their objectives in order to prevent some form of catastrophe occurring. There will also be mech missions, which afford you the opportunity to pilot a mech yourself if you're lucky. These work a little bit like duels in Boscia. You can apply to be a pilot, and the more times you are not chosen, you will accrue pity tickets that will increase your chances the next time. If you don't get picked to be a pilot, you will instead be a supporter. The mech is able to use their unique abilities to hack, slash, and shoot their way through materials, cutting a swathe with ease, whereas supporters are a little more limited. There's also a system that mimics the Kupo of Fortune from Ishgard Restoration called Cosmic Fortune, including a bunch of new items and glamours, and even at least one brand new dye. We saw metallic cobalt green here, and can expect there to be a few more as well. There's also a ranking system, though this one is both friendlier and more rewarding than that which came in Shadowbringers. So, days will cycle every 24 hours between tally periods and rest periods. Completing Cosmic Exploration activities within the tally period will increase your contribution. There's no class split, this is just overall contribution. The player who contributed the most within that 24-hour period will be named the Star Contributor. The Star Contributor gets a bunch of privileges for the next 14 days. A hologram of them will be projected within base camps, their name will be displayed on bulletin boards within base camps, and they will receive a unique visual effect when exploring the stars. Then they are locked out from receiving it again for another 2 weeks. Honestly, this is really neat, and I'd love to see more unique visual effects for in-game achievements. Helping others, maybe. Most mental roulettes, there's tons they can do. The crafter relics for this expansion start here as well. Occult Crescent, the new field exploration, was shown off in depth as well. It has a unique leveling system called Knowledge Level. It works a bit like Eureka, in which if you die whilst being at knowledge level 5 or above, you will lose XP unless somebody is able to res you before your timer runs out. You can lower your level here too if you die too many times. As well as your knowledge level, you have support jobs with their own leveling systems, which allow you to access new actions that can be slotted to provide you more options whilst in the Occult Crescent. I have a video on the channel that goes through a bunch of the support jobs, but you begin with Freelancer. There are 12 support jobs in total to begin with. More will be released with patch 7.4 and 7.5, and those are unlocked through progression in this zone. They made a new support action ring as well to allow you to bind all 5 support actions from a job at once, should you wish, via one button. Though you can also just do it the old-fashioned way and give each of them a space on your hotbar themselves. Critical encounters, a system ported almost one-for-one from critical engagements in Bozja, now require you to be standing in the pulsing spawn circle of the encounter in order to access, rather than queuing in via a pseudo duty finder. This way is better, I think, for the active player. Fates also exist. You can sync your knowledge level with other members of your party to put you closer to one another and allow you to more easily hunt overworld enemies without sacrificing XP potential. This removes one of the minor pain points from Eureka that was a little annoying to deal with, and this system is fully optional. Chain kills are back just like in the main game to increase your obtained XP exponentially. There are treasure chests randomly in the overworld too, and you can just grab them for free items. We also have 2 currencies with caches totaling up to 9,999. One is obtained from fates and critical encounters, and the other one is obtained from defeating monsters in the field. It's really good that we're incentivized to do both, actually. Of course, the relic questline begins here too. There's also a brand new 48-player duty inside called the Forked Tower. This acts as a counterpart to the other large-scale duties like Baldessian Arsenal. To obtain access, you can acquire ciphers while exploring. When a collection of 16 or more players use their ciphers together at a specific location, they will be teleported into the tower shortly afterwards. If more than 48 players are on the platform, people will be selected at random to go in, with preference given to cipher holders. Yeah, it's like a streamlined system of the BA entry, and yeah, you will 100% get snipers trying to hop into organized runs and push out the people that were in parties. So that bit's very suboptimal, not ideal, but aside from that, it's all bloody fantastic, and I'm excited to get stuck in. Funnily enough, since probably 6.2, I don't play Final Fantasy XIV at all outside of progression and when I'm streaming. I enjoy the time that I spend with it, but aside from those 5 to 10 hours a week and maybe a little more during prog week, I have not felt a massive desire to log in, so I just don't. This live letter actually stirred active excitement within me. More than just it looks cool, I want to commit some time to this and go through a bit of an FF14 phase again. So thanks for that. I hope it lives up to those feelings it's given me. Also, one thing that got mentioned in an interview but wasn't mentioned in the live letter itself, as far as I can remember, is the fact that you'll be able to mount up whilst moving. But I mentioned that there's negative earlier. There is one job that always gets put under a magnifying glass every patch because it's Yoshida's main and he always uses it for playtesting. It's changing a lot in 7.2, once again. It's of course Black Mage. Firstly, Astral Fire is losing its timer entirely, meaning that you do not need to maintain its upkeep in order to keep Enochian and cast Fire 4. Leylines has been reduced from 30 seconds to 20 seconds to line it up with 2-minute raid buffs. Fire 4 and Flare Star are getting reduced cast times, with Flare Star being put in line with Fire 4 and Fire 4 reducing to a base cast of 2 seconds. Flare Star gets buffed from 400 to 500 potency as well. Blizzard 4 and likely Fire 4, though we don't know for sure. These two have always been kept at the same potency for a very long time, so we can expect that they will be getting a small nerf in their potency as well. So, a 2-second base cast is not enough to weave afterwards. It's not like a healer DPS GCD, but is a little more reminiscent of casts like Medica. It affords you extra space to make small movements before the next cast, reducing those positioning constraints you may have had before. The reason I'm not into these changes from a sheer conceptual angle are because they actively take away from traditional Black Mage job fantasy. Black Mage has, since Heavensward and arguably even A Realm Reborn, been the turret job that plans its movement. Yet for the last few patches they have actively moved away from that without implementing a new job fantasy to focus on in its place. It is becoming, slowly but surely, just like the other jobs. This is clearly a change that has been implemented in an attempt to reduce the effectiveness of non-standard rotations, and to make Black Mage a lot more what you see is what you get. When Dawntrail released, that was clearly the core reasoning behind the rework, to reduce friction and ensure that the standard rotation was as close to optimal as possible. And yet, non-standard survived, morphing into something entirely new. Will it morph once more instead of disappearing like Square Enix once? Probably, honestly. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's just going to change. I don't like these reactive, overarching playstyle changes though. Numbers are fine. The balancing is important and can be done without damaging how a job actually feels in the moment to moment, but these overarching changes being constantly made feels impulsive, almost panicky. Patch on patch on patch on patch, gameplay changes being made to the core of the way that Black Mage plays. I really do believe that the job design team could do with sitting down and thinking on how they want the core identity of each job to be, and how they can best bring it to reality in game for 8.0. I prefer us to see a real vision from them, even if it's one the player base doesn't agree with, and for them to stick with that vision. That will be willing to accept that players just aren't going to play your creation the way you are demanding them to. Non-standard Black Mage was fun, and it should be allowed to exist. Thank you so much for watching this video if you've made it this far. Usually I make a point of not asking people to subscribe or trying to promote my own things as much as possible in videos, because I feel a little weird doing so, but today I hope you'll indulge me. Firstly, I have a second YouTube channel on which I'm going to make video essays about gaming, life, and basically anything that catches my fancy. There's nothing on it right now, but the first video releases March 20th. An hour-long video essay that I'm honestly pretty happy with the end result of, and it would mean the world to me if you'd give it a shot. The channel is Rinon Banana, and I've left the link in the description. If you subscribe and give that video a try, I really, genuinely appreciate it. The second announcement is that I'm making a change to the way that I make videos on this channel. To say it plainly, making weekly FF14 videos is not sustainable in the way that I make them, and I'll be stopping. In 2024, I created and published 80 videos on my YouTube channel, each and every one scripted and a topic that I care about. I can't thank you enough for the support, and I enjoyed doing it, but at the end of the year, I was dreadfully burnt out. I took a short break, but even that didn't help, and with diminishing returns thanks to my reduced output, it stopped being financially viable to do so too. I'm not going to be quitting. Instead, I have another plan. I will only make the videos that I want to make. It sounds silly, but in pursuit of meeting a quota of releasing weekly videos, it pushed me to avoid the topics I was truly passionate about. Videos like the top video and the DSR video, the 100 creators video, and the 2024 story video. I didn't take risks or delve as deep into topics as I wanted to. So, from now on, each video will likely be a lot longer, a bit like this one, and more painstakingly developed. And on the downside, they'll release a little less often than that which came before. When it comes to discussion videos like these, because I'm going to be honest, I still like a yap from time to time, they will take on a similar format to this, multiple topics packaged together with connections between each to take on a wider overall conversation. That light heavyweight video is coming out soon, as well as another that I'm working on. If you want to support me despite that, I have a Patreon. You can support for as little as £1 a month, and there you'll get access to behind the scenes updates and releases, as well as an exclusive bi-weekly show. I released work in progresses and discussions about this video there even last week. I don't expect people to support me there, you're under no obligation. But it exists if you feel so inclined. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Let's have a good 7.2.